Good evening, everyone. South Dakota has a lot of intriguing stories, and I fell down several rabbit holes while doing the background research for this entry in the State Iceberg series. For those that don't know, an iceberg covers a topic in a formatted chart like this. The entries become increasingly more bizarre and obscure as we descend downwards through the tiers. I'll start at the second tier, so that we can quickly access the stranger aspects of the state of South Dakota. Hello, if you like what you see in this video, please consider supporting me by either checking out the Patreon or by subscribing. Let's begin. Sitting Bull. This Lakota tribe chief was best known for unifying the Sioux peoples in a war against the encroaching U.S. Army. He fought at the infamous Battle of Little Bighorn. His initial campaign only slowed due to a massive famine in the region. He was taken out at the Grand River in 1890. Wind Cave National Park. The park is well known for its boxwork formations, honeycomb patterned structures that extrude from Wind Cave's walls. Bob Barker. Bob Barker was best known for hosting the famous game show, The Price is Right. He was born in Washington State and spent his early years living on the Rosebud Indian Reservation in Mission, South Dakota. His mother was known for her book, Our State, which covered the history of South Dakota in a format designed for teaching middle schoolers. Smet. This town of around 1,000 people lies in Kingsbury County. It's best known for being the home of Laura Ingalls Wilder, the author who wrote The Little House on the Prairie books. Mitchell Corn Palace. This location was constructed in Mitchell, North Dakota in the late 19th century. It was made to serve as a gathering place for the town's residents and to host the town's harvest festivals in the fall. The Corn Palace Festival quickly became a popular tourist attraction. The palace was expanded in 1905 and then 1919 as it drew in more people. The current structure was made in 1921 to serve as a permanent landmark in the region. The Corn Palace hosted the first state basketball tournament in the winter of that same year. The Mitchell Basketball Arena still remains there to this day. In the present day, it hosts events like high school and college graduations, proms, meetings, and basketball tournaments. The palace is decorated with different types of corn each year. Biker bars. Multiple historic biker bars lie throughout South Dakota. Full Throttle, The Knuckle, and One-Eyed Jack's are some of the most well-known saloons. The Full Throttle Saloon is the largest biker bar in the world, with the following quote coming from their official website. "We get about 15,000 people at night. They go through a lot of beer. We get 2 tractor trailers full of beer delivered every night of the rallies. There are so many motorcycles clogging the road that they can't send trucks during the day, so they come after 3 a.m. when the bar is closed." These bars are the staging ground for the Sturgis Motorcycle Rally, an event that has existed since the late 1930s. It occurs in early August each year. The rally initially focused on high-speed races and stunts, and grew to include motocross and other events over the decades. January Jones. This actress is best known for her role as Betty Draper in the series Mad Men, a role which saw her nominated for 2 Golden Globe Awards. She grew up in Sioux Falls and Hecla. Bear Butte. This place is a sacred site to many Native American tribes throughout the region, with many worshippers viewing it as a place where the spiritual and physical spaces intertwine. Ellsworth Air Force Base. This base is located near Rapid City, South Dakota. It's home to the 28th Bomb Wing, which is primarily made out of B-1 bombers and MQ-9 Reapers. The base was originally called the Rapid City Army Air Base when it opened in September 1942. It served as a training base for B-17 pilots throughout the Second World War. It was renamed in 1953 in memory of a general named Richard Ellsworth, who tragically died in a plane crash in Newfoundland. Fifth, Mount Rushmore Face. The initial concept for the now famous Mount Rushmore Monument was created by a South Dakotan historian named Doane Robinson. Robinson wanted to get state funding for a project that would commemorate some aspects of his home state's history. His original idea would see Lewis and Clark, Buffalo Bill, and the Native American leader Red Cloud immortalized on the face of Mount Rushmore. An artist named Gutzon Borglum was commissioned to start the project. Borglum was an ambitious sculptor who had his own ideas for what the finished Mount Rushmore should look like. He decided to pick presidents for his monument. The final product saw the faces of Washington, Jefferson, Lincoln, and Roosevelt carved onto the surface of the mountain. The fifth face of Mount Rushmore is the nickname for Black Elk, a Native American leader who fought at Little Bighorn and survived the brutal disaster at Wounded Knee. Black Elk went on to become a successful rancher and teacher. He earned the nickname Fifth Face of Mount Rushmore for his thousands of appearances in photos taken by tourists. He was an unofficial greeter for people visiting the area. Rapid City Statues. Over 40 life-size bronze statues skulk throughout the streets of Rapid City, South Dakota. 6 different artists coordinated to work on the project. The City of Presidents began the undertaking in 1999. The process is relatively quick. Each statue is privately backed, so the organization must wait for funding to be secured before they begin. Local artists must research every aspect of their subject as they determine how to design the facial expression, clothing, pose, and details of the statue. It took the team about 9 months on average to finish one. The artists eventually caught up to the Obama administration, and a new policy was implemented. Statues would be made only after the real candidate had either left office permanently or ceased being politically active. Black Elk Peak. Black Elk Peak is the highest point between the Rocky Mountains and the Pyrenees Mountains in France, measuring 7,242 feet high. It's named for the famous Native American leader. Black Elk is said to have experienced a vision while on this peak. He was only 9 years old at the time. He said the following in a personal account. "I was standing on the highest mountain of them all, and round about beneath me was the whole hoop of the world. While I stood there, I saw more than I can tell, and I understood more than I saw. For I was seeing in a sacred manner the shapes of all things in the spirit, and the shape of all shapes." The peak was named Harney Peak in 1855. Harney was a general nicknamed the Mad Bear, which he earned after conducting some brutal campaigns in the Indian Wars and the Mexican-American War. He took out defenseless civilians in multiple confrontations and harbored a great temper and cruelty. The Lakota people campaigned to rename it for over half a century. Their efforts saw the name changed in 2016. George McGovern. McGovern was a reformist Democratic politician who campaigned for president in 1972. He ran on a platform that promised an immediate end to the Vietnam War, along with a series of sweeping social and economic changes. He was defeated by Nixon. Wild Bill Hickok. Wild Bill is one of the most famous gunslingers in the history of the Old West. He was born in Illinois. He went on to join a renegade group called the Free State Army in the town of Bleeding, Kansas. Wild Bill served as a marksman and bodyguard during the Free State Army's war against pro-slavery groups in the 1850s. He went on to work for the Pony Express and was almost taken out in a brutal confrontation with a black bear in the Southwest. Wild Bill earned his nickname for his exploits as a spy, scout, and sharpshooter for the Union in the Civil War. He married a former circus performer named Agnes Lane in the post-war years and traveled to the goldfields of South Dakota in the 1870s. He settled in Deadwood and began to serve as a peace officer. His job took a physical toll on his health, and Wild Bill's skills diminished due to a contracted case of glaucoma, which ruined his eyesight. Eyesight is pretty important when you're a law enforcement officer in Old Deadwood. He joined a friendly poker game in August 1876. Hickok's last poker hand was a pair of black aces and black eights. An outlaw named Jack McCall took him out at that exact moment as Wild Bill sat in the saloon. Wild Bill's last hand is now known as the Dead Man's Hand. He was buried down the road in Mount Moriah Cemetery. Chislic. This meal is considered the unofficial state dish of South Dakota. Chislic is made out of cubes of skewered meat that have been deep fried or grilled over an open fire. Mutton, venison, and beef are usually utilized to make Chislic. Chislic arrived in South Dakota with German-Russian immigrants who brought their culinary traditions with them to America. Petrified Wood. Forests of fossilized trees can be found all throughout South Dakota. There's even a museum dedicated to petrified wood in the town of Lemon. This Petrified Wood Park and Museum houses a castle made out of the material, along with Mammoth and Dinosaur bones. Crazy Horse Memorial. Crazy Horse fought in Little Bighorn and other engagements against the U.S. military in the latter half of the 1870s. He refused to have his likeness portrayed in any form of media after the war. Crazy Horse held the belief that these photos would take away a part of his soul. He was killed in 1877 after a negotiation with the U.S. military went south. Years later, a chief with the title Standing Bear would lead an initiative to build a memorial to Crazy Horse in the Black Hills. Standing Bear reached out to a talented Polish-American sculptor named Korczak Ziolkowski. Ziolkowski assisted with the construction of Mount Rushmore in 1939 and got attention with his statue of Noah Webster, a Connecticut resident who is considered the father of the American education system. He was contacted by Standing Bear in the fall of 1939 and began research for the Crazy Horse Memorial. The sculptor was forced to take a hiatus after America entered the Second World War. Ziolkowski arrived in South Dakota in May 1947 to start the project. His plans were incredibly ambitious. He said that he would work for no profit and aimed to carve the entire 563-foot mountain into a visage of Crazy Horse. Ziolkowski carved the shape out over the next few decades and even started a side project to build his own tomb into the base of the mountain in the early 1970s. He would pass away in 1982 at the age of 74, and his body would be interred in the tomb. His wife and 10 children decided to use his left-behind drawings and books to finish the carving. The face was finally finished on June 3, 1998, 50 years after the first blast that heralded the start of the project. The outstretched hand of Crazy Horse and the mane of the mount he would ride in the finished memorial were completed in 2012. The first finished fingers were completed in 2016. The project continues. It's estimated that Crazy Horse's outstretched hand, shoulders, arms, and the top of the horse's head that he is riding will be finished by 2033. I'll hopefully have this series completed by then. It seems likely that this memorial will be finished well over 100 years after Ziolkowski started. Rapid City Dinosaur Park. Dinosaur Park was built by the Works Progress Administration in 1936 during the Great Depression. The city administration wanted to draw the tourists that would be going to the soon-to-be-completed Mount Rushmore Monument. Multiple excavation sites in the area had unearthed fossilized dinosaur footprints and fragments of their skeletons. Rapid City decided to capitalize on this and hired several sculptors who were working on Mount Rushmore to work on a dinosaur-themed display. The team, which was led by a sculptor named Emmett Sullivan, made 7 dinosaurs that were metal pipe frames encased in concrete. They were painted a muted gray. The site was opened in May 1936. The dinosaurs were repainted in a green-white color scheme in the 1950s. The attraction remains free and open to the public. Casinos and gas stations. Many gas stations feature these. They typically contain just slot machines, which serve as a draw for the residents of some small communities. John Thune. This senator from South Dakota is best known for the fact that he replaced Mitch McConnell to become the leader for the Republican Senate. He was elected to the Senate in 2004. Pier is pronounced Pier. The state capital was named after Pierre Chouteau Jr., an influential American fur trader born to French parents in the late 1700s. He assisted in the construction of Fort Pierre along the Missouri River, which provided shelter to settlers traversing the Dakota territories. The story goes that the mispronunciation originated from Norwegian immigrants who settled Pier in the mid to late 1800s. Rapid City, Berlin Wall. 2 tank traps and a section of the original wall that separated East and West Berlin can be found in Rapid City. Multiple plaques detail the bloody history of the wall.
A vital element in keeping the peace is our military establishment. Our arms must be mighty, ready for instant action, so that no potential aggressor may be tempted to risk his own destruction.
Minutemen, missile silos. These abandoned silos dot the countryside throughout South Dakota. They once housed older intercontinental Minuteman missiles. Some have been converted into museums and homes in the past few decades. There's an entire historic site dedicated to those Cold War relics. The Minuteman Missile Historic Site covers over 13,500 square miles of the southwestern portion of the state. Thousands of personnel worked at 15 separate launch control centers that oversaw 150 Minuteman II missiles. It is open to the public. Hidden Room at Mount Rushmore. Gutzon Borglum was a talented artist who was not a pleasant guy. He was egotistical, with multiple stories telling of his many angry outbursts at his patrons and his general hard-headedness. Borglum's ego only grew larger when he received the commission to start the Mount Rushmore project. He started to care less about the faces and grew convinced that this monument could be one of the few indicators in the far future that the U.S. ever existed. He wrote the following in his personal account. "You might as well drop a letter into the world's postal service without an address or signature as to send that carved mountain into history without identification. Each civilization forgets its predecessor. Civilizations are ghouls." As such, he made his own plans and mapped out a hall of records. He began work on the unauthorized side project in 1938, 11 years into the project. His hall of records would house the Bill of Rights, Constitution, and countless other pieces of American history. An 800-foot-tall rock staircase would lead to a massive doorway headed by a 38-foot-wide gold-plated eagle with its wings outstretched. The government, understandably, didn't approve of the additional spending. Borglum, predictably, didn't care and worked on the chamber for the next 3 years. He died in 1941, and his son took over the project. Borglum was buried in a cemetery in Glendale, California. The Hall of Records was left unfinished. A plaque lies in the room today. It's carved with a quote from Borglum. "Breathe a prayer that these records will endure, until the wind and rain alone shall wear them away." The room remains closed to the public. Lifelight Festival. This event is held over the Labor Day weekend in Sioux Falls. The event has been around since 1998. The free festival features Christian music artists, speakers, and various other family-friendly activities. It serves as a welcoming place for fellowship and spiritual renewal. Some relatively popular Midwestern Christian bands like Sanctus Real and Remedy Drive have performed here in the past. South Dakota corruption. South Dakota saw some serious state governmental upheaval in 2024. The state's Attorney General, Marty Jackley, made waves, exposing multiple instances of fraud and the absence of oversight in many parts of their government. One case involved a health inspector named Renee Strong, who was indicted on 26 counts of falsifying health inspections for local restaurants. Others stole from social services and the Department of Revenue over the course of several years. George S. Mickelson and George T. Mickelson. Both of these men were politicians from the prominent Mickelson family. George T. was governor of the state from 1947 to 1951, while his son, George S., served as governor from 1986 to 1993. George S. passed away in 1993 when the plane he was traveling in crashed. The George S. Mickelson Trail, which runs for over 100 miles in the Black Hills, is dedicated to the late governor. The Mickelsons, along with the Bashirs of Kentucky, remain as the only father-son duos that served as governors over the same state. Hot Springs Mammoth Site. This excavation site uncovered the remains of over 60 Columbian mammoths in the mid-1970s. It is the most extensive collection of mammoth skeletons in the world. The site was discovered when a landowner was working on a housing development on a small 14-acre property in Hot Springs, South Dakota. A heavy machine operator found tusks and bones while he was bulldozing the area. The owner halted any further construction and reached out to multiple different colleges to see if anyone was interested. The heavy machine operator's son got in contact with his old professor, who taught geology and archaeology courses in an Arizona college. A field crew came in and found that the site was of great scientific value. What makes this site so unique is that the mammoth skeletons haven't been taken out and put on display. Instead, they remain in the rock bed where they were found. Belle Fourche pronunciation. This small town takes its name from the nearby Belle Fourche River. That name means beautiful fork in French and refers to the junction between Belle Fourche River and Redwater Creek. KELOland News. The KELOland Media Group continues to be the most influential media company in the connected borders of South Dakota, Iowa, Minnesota, and Nebraska. It first came on air in May 1953, becoming the first television station in South Dakota. Live broadcasts from the KELOland studio were first televised in 1955. A children's show began its run on KELOland the same year. Captain 11 was an after-school program hosted by Dave Dedrick. Captain 11 would read letters sent in from local families in segments between regularly broadcasted cartoons. He wore an altered airline pilot's uniform, and his set, a futuristic spaceship, was made out of the disassembled parts of a pinball machine. Captain 11 became immensely popular and made multiple appearances at local fairs, parades, and festivals. The show ran from 1955 to 1996, making it the longest continuously running children's TV show in American history. 1876 Gold Rush. Colonel Custer's expedition found gold in the newly mapped Black Hills region in 1874. Word spread rapidly, and over 10,000 people ventured into the Dakota Territory to look for gold in the hills. The town of Deadwood was established soon after. Evans Plunge. This attraction was established in 1890, making it the oldest tourist destination in the Black Hills. These pools of spring-fed mineral water sit at a constant temperature of 87 degrees Fahrenheit. Over 5,000 gallons pour into Evans Plunge each minute. It is the largest natural indoor warm water pool in the world. Keystone Wye. This interchange was built in 1967 as a conversion from US 16 to a 4-lane highway. It's a unique-looking wooden bridge. Keystone Wye is 66 feet high and made out of glued-together timber pieces and wooden arches. Its name apparently dates back to a time far before the interchange was built. Its designers, Clyde Yount and Kenneth Wilson, wanted to create a structure that would harmonize with the highway's surroundings. Multiple wooden spans were transported from Portland, Oregon. A truck carrying 3 arches from a rail station in Hill City, South Dakota, overturned. The pieces seemed to be intact, but the engineers were taking no chances. The arches were made into the dance pavilion, which can be seen at an exit that leads to the closed Sitting Bull Crystal Caverns. Reservation Poverty. Poverty affects many reservations throughout South Dakota. The epicenter of this lies in the Pine Ridge Reservation in the southwest corner of the state. The following statistics came from 2010. The average life expectancy there was around 66 years, the lowest in the entirety of the U.S. It also possessed the lowest per capita income in the nation, at $8,768 annually. It also ranked last in quality of life, clinical care, physical environment, and social and economic factors in the state of South Dakota. The poorest community in America, Allen, lies within the Pine Ridge Reservation. The reservation is plagued by widespread disease, untreated health conditions, addiction, substance abuse, and crime. The Rosebud and Cheyenne River communities are also badly affected by poverty and these other conditions. Stephen Foster Briggs. This inventor from Watertown is best known for his work at the Briggs & Stratton Engine Company. He worked on the F1 gasoline engine, which came out in 1929. It was used in early gasoline engine lawnmowers. Sioux Falls drivers. Sioux Falls is currently listed as one of the most dangerous cities to drive in throughout the entirety of the U.S. It has one of the highest rates of DUI arrests in the country, with 676 arrests per 100,000 people. It shares the most unsafe drivers list with Fargo, Oakland, Detroit, and North Charleston, South Carolina. Spearfish Canyon. Frank Lloyd Wright, a famous architect and designer, said the following about the canyon. "I've heard so little of this miracle, and we, toward the Atlantic, have heard so much of the Grand Canyon when this is even more miraculous. All the better, eventually, that the Dakotas are not on the through line to the coast." This nature area is considered one of the most beautiful sections of the Black Hills. It features sheer limestone cliffs decked with stands of trees that have beautiful foliage in the fall. Pierre Population. The state capital has a population of only 13,800 as of 2023. Sanford Underground Research Facility. This location was built in the old Homestake gold mine near the lovely sounding town of Lead, South Dakota. It was used in an experiment in the mid-1960s and then closed. The government kept an eye on the site and created plans for a future high-tech research complex. The land was bought out by the state and the Department of Energy in 2006 and converted into an underground research area. The Sanford Underground Research Facility, SURF for short, is the deepest research facility in the U.S. Its mission statement is to advance world-class science and inspire learning across the subsequent decades of American history. SURF works on many different projects. Here are just a few. The world's most sensitive dark matter detector, the Lux Zeppelin, started operations there in 2021. There's a microbial lab that researches life forms that could help improve medicine and make new biofuels. The geology section has been studying the way hot fluids travel through rock fractures as part of an effort to make a clean energy generator. Other areas serve as training grounds for mine rescue teams and civil engineers. Sioux Falls Meatpacking Plant. There are multiple plants throughout Sioux Falls. One of the most significant meatpacking plants is owned by John Morrill and Company. The plant opened in 1909 and became a major source of employment for many decades. It was bought out by Smithfield Foods in 1995, which remains one of the largest meat processing companies in the country. Think signs. These markers, called fatal accident markers, or more commonly, think signs, are placed in spots where fatal roadside accidents have occurred. They can be found all throughout South Dakota and are part of a program developed in the 1970s that continues to be funded by county-level highway departments. Nearly half of the markers have been placed there due to accidents caused by drunk driving. Multiple signs can be found grouped together in dangerous parts of the state. Great Sioux War of 1876. This conflict was between the U.S. government and the combined forces of the Lakota Sioux in northern Cheyenne. It took place in the Black Hills region. The most famous engagement was the infamous Battle of Little Bighorn. The conflict began when settlers rushed into the Black Hills after gold was discovered there in 1874. This broke the old Fort Laramie Treaty, which promised that the Sioux would retain the sacred site of the Black Hills. The U.S. offered to pay for the land, but the Sioux rejected the offer, starting a conflict that would last through 1877. Mount Moriah Cemetery. The cemetery is located on a plateau overlooking Deadwood Gulch. It's the resting place for the bodies of famous outlaws, criminals, law officers, and other figures who influenced the town of Deadwood. It remains open to the public. Dignity Sculpture. This stainless steel sculpture was created by Dale Claude Lamphere, a South Dakota native who had made stainless steel art installations for different towns throughout the lower 48. A Rapid City businessman named Norm McKee commissioned Lamphere to make a monument that would honor the Lakota and Dakota nations. Lamphere began his work on November 2, 2014, which marked the 125th anniversary of South Dakota's founding. The artist took inspiration from a series of photographs of 3 different Lakota women while making the statue. The project was named The Dignity of Earth and Sky. The figure of a woman with a quilt extended behind her back was finished in 2016. She was installed on the side of I-90 near Chamberlain. 2016 Anti-Corruption Bill. Measure 22, also known as the South Dakota Corruption Act, was a bill that aimed to exact over 70 changes to state campaign finance and lobbying laws. There were a few major changes within the measure. Nonpartisan voter guides and advocacy groups will be required to make clear statements about their political leanings. Lobbyists wouldn't be allowed to give gifts of more than $100 in value to political figures. The bill was repealed in 2017 and continues to be a hot topic within state politics. Geographic Center of the U.S. This entry, interestingly enough, was also covered in the North Dakota video I made a few months back. Belle Fourche claims the title of Center of the Nation. Their argument is connected to the most recently admitted state in the Union. Hawaii became a state in 1959, and its landmass shifted the geographic center of the U.S. to a spot 20 miles north of Belle Fourche. The town went on to commission a granite monument made into the shape of a compass rose. It was designed by a local named Mont Amand. Some towns are just truck stops. Some places throughout the state are sustained by large truck stops and little else. Some examples include the town of Vivian in Lyman County and Kadoka in Jackson County. Saloon No. 10. This place was named for Placer Claim No. 10, a mining spot on which the saloon was built. Buffalo Bill, Calamity Jane, Doc Holliday, and Wyatt Earp drink at Saloon No. 10 at various different points in the history of the Old West. The saloon is best known as the place where Wild Bill Hickok was fatally shot during a game of poker. Serenity Dennard. Serenity Dennard was a 9-year-old girl who was in the patient program of the Black Hills Children's Home in Rapid City. Serenity was undergoing treatment for a variety of behavioral and mental problems that had arisen after she was separated from her biological parents. Her issues had worsened as she moved between foster families in the intervening years. She arrived at the children's home in July 2018. Serenity tried to run away in January 2019 and was designated for additional monitoring and attention from the staff. Serenity slipped out of the building a week later, on February 3rd. The staff had been chasing another child who had run off into an outbuilding on the property, giving Serenity a window of time in which to escape. A person driving through the area reported seeing the girl heading on South Rockerville Road at 11 a.m. that morning. She was about a mile out from the home. The witness tried to follow the girl into the woods, but lost her in the trees. The person went on to inform the home staff, and search and rescue efforts began in earnest. The search lasted for almost 2 years, with authorities scouring over 5,000 square miles of terrain. They found nothing. The case remains unsolved, as of the time of writing. May 12, 2025, marks Serenity's 17th birthday. Sioux Falls collapse. It was a clear day on the morning of December 2nd, 2016. A contractor named Ethan McMahon was busy working on the first floor of the Copper Lounge building in downtown Sioux Falls. He removed 2 load-bearing walls that separated the lounge from the abandoned Skelly's pub. The entire structure collapsed, taking out McMahon. The rubble trapped a young woman who was living on the second floor. She was safely freed by first responders hours later. Investigators pulled up to the scene and began to research the events leading up to the collapse. They found over 29 OSHA violations in the site, and evidence that the contractor had removed asbestos from the basement and simply thrown it in the local landfill. McMahon had been hired by a shady company called Hanuaula LLC, based out of Kona in Hawaii. Spearfish Record. This entry has nothing to do with fishing. The town of Spearfish, South Dakota, experienced the largest temperature change in the shortest amount of time in recorded history. The record was established on January 22nd, 1943. The weather went from -4 degrees Fahrenheit at 7:30 a.m. to 45 degrees at 7:32 a.m. Something called a fawn wind allowed this to occur. Moist air from the west dropped water off the western side of a nearby mountain, causing warm, dry air to heat up as it descended on spearfish. Jasper Wildfire. A dropped match started the largest fire in South Dakotan history. The fire began on August 24, 2000, and consumed roughly 83,000 acres of land in the Black Hills. Over 1,000 firefighters were involved in the eradication of the Jasper Fire. Sioux Falls Children's Hospital Castle. This facility was opened in 2009. It's modeled on a castle. It holds 146 beds and spacious private suites for intensive care patients. The Children's Hospital was designed to be as comforting as possible, with each of the building's 5 levels decorated like the interior of a fantastical medieval castle. State Attorney General Incident. Jason Ravensborg, the former South Dakota Attorney General, was driving back from a political fundraiser in the early fall of 2020. He was going down a rural highway when he made an illegal lane change, hitting a man named Joseph Bover who was walking down the highway. Ravensborg was confused and called 911 to report that he had hit what he believed to be a deer. A local sheriff arrived, and the Attorney General left the scene that night. He claimed that he hadn't even realized he had struck a man until he came back to the crash site the next morning. Ravensborg pleaded guilty to an illegal lane change and using a phone while driving, and lost his position and law license. He was fined by the judge and reached a private settlement with Bover's widow. Pactola Reservoir. This lake covers an intriguing series of historical events. A town was built in the area in 1875. It was mockingly named Camp Crook by a group of fugitive gold miners hiding from an army detachment led by a general named George Crook. Crook caught up with the miners and removed them from the area. The general set up his own base and used the Pactola region as a staging ground for sorties to chase down other miners and fight the native tribes. The government later lifted the ban on mining in the Black Hills, and a gold rush made thousands flock to Camp Crook. The camp became a bustling town over the years, and a railroad and hotel were built. Camp Crook underwent a name change in the late 1870s. A resident proposed to name the town Pactola after the Pactolus River, an ancient river in present-day Turkey that was said to be a source of wealth for the old Lydian kingdom. The proposal was approved, and Pactola was established. Pactola's population dwindled in the successive decades after the gold rush, and was almost a ghost town by the early 1950s. It was selected as the site for a dam, and its buildings were bought out. The Pactola Dam was finished in 1956 to provide Rapid City with a reliable source of water and power. Pactola was hidden from the world. Divers exploring the lake have seen old construction equipment, railroad beds, and the remains of a civilian conservation corps camp in the reservoir. Indian reservation suicides. Native American communities still experience the highest rates of suicide out of any U.S. racial or ethnic group, as reported by government authorities. It remains the 5th leading cause of death for the Native American community. Intergenerational trauma, extreme poverty and disease, and emotional and physical harm have been linked to this. There's also few dedicated mental health resources and almost no state support for these communities. Several tribes are actively implementing programs to combat this, and lobbyists and communities are pushing for more government support. Sioux Falls Ghetto. Sioux Falls has a relatively average crime rate, ranking in the 52nd percentile for crime in American cities. There are some more sketchy neighborhoods towards the north of town. Janklow. Bill Janklow served as an attorney general, congressman, and governor in the state of South Dakota. He was noted for his abrasive nature, aggressive pushes to pass proposals, and for his drive to get tasks done. Janklow had a habit of driving far above the speed limit, both while conducting official trips or when going back home. This led to his political downfall in 2003. Janklow ran through a stop sign at the intersection of a pair of remote county roads at speeds over 70 miles an hour, taking out a motorcycle that was crossing the intersection. This fatally wounded the motorcyclist, a man named Randolph Scott, and badly injured Janklow. Janklow resigned from the House of Representatives in the aftermath of the fatal crash. He passed away in January 2012. Out-of-state residents with South Dakota license plates. South Dakota law allows anyone within any U.S. state to register their car in South Dakota. As a result, some people will register their off-road vehicles with South Dakota. Many parts of the country require citizens to maintain auto insurance even while living out of country. South Dakota doesn't require vehicle owners to maintain that insurance. Expats, people living outside their native country, will use that to avoid having to renew their driver's license. Others will use this to avoid state income taxes. Calamity Jane. Calamity Jane was a famous frontierswoman who wandered around the Old West. She arrived in Deadwood in 1876 and found work as a bull whacker. Her job involved hauling goods and machinery to remote mining camps in the Black Hills. Calamity Jane drifted in and out of Deadwood in the next few decades. She passed away in 1903 at the town of Terry, 7 miles south of Deadwood. Hotel Alex Johnson. This hotel is a historic piece of Rapid City. It's also a member of the Curio Collection by Hilton, a series of hotels from around the world that have unique stories behind them. The hotel opened in July 1928 and features distinctive Tudor-inspired architecture. It's also considered one of the most haunted places in the state. The spirit of Alex Johnson, the founder of the hotel, has been seen wandering the third floor of the hotel since his passing in 1938. He lived out of room 304. Room 812 is the most haunted space within Hotel Alex Johnson. In the 1970s, a young newlywed bride committed suicide by throwing herself off the balcony. Her family insisted that the woman was taken out in an act of foul play. She was to be the inheritor of a massive sum of money. Her murder remains unsolved to this day. A woman in a white gown patrols the 8th floor late in the night, close to the time of the alleged suicide. Box Elder. This town of 14,000 is home to Ellsworth Air Force Base, which is set to host the future B-21 bomber. Box Elder also has the South Dakota Air and Space Museum. Chili with cinnamon rolls. This meal was first served by Midwest school lunch programs in the 1950s. It became popular with many children growing up in the region. East-West Dakota. The Dakotas used to be far larger than they are today. The original Dakota Territory took parts of Montana and Wyoming. The territory was separated north to south in 1889. Some people wanted, and some still do, the separation to run in an east-west split along the Missouri River, like this. East Dakota would take more inhabitants, but West Dakota would have access to the northwestern oil fields. Homestake Mine. This body of ore was was discovered in Bobtail Gulch in 1876. It's right near the ghost town of Blacktail in Lawrence County. Miners found gold in surface-level veins, and crews dug exploration trenches. The trenches uncovered even more veins of gold, and underground operations continued for another 125 years. The operation was continuous for the entire time, and over 41 million ounces of gold and 9 million ounces of silver were taken from the Homestake mine. It provided jobs for generations of people and brought wealth to the nearby town of Lead. The Homestake Mining Company was closed in 2002. It's now the site of the Sanford Research Facility from earlier in this video. The Bullock Hotel. Seth Bullock was a Canadian emigre who became a core part of Deadwood's history. He moved from Canada to Montana at a young age and became a successful businessman. He went on to become a senator for the Montana Territory and became close friends with Teddy Roosevelt. Bullock moved east to Deadwood in 1876 to look for customers in the mountain camps. Bullock would go on to serve as the first sheriff in the town and saw action as a U.S. Marshal. His group established the Star and Bullock hardware store, and the venture saw success up until it burned to the ground in the fire of 1879. Bullock used his leftover funds to complete the luxurious Bullock Hotel in 1895. He then left town in 1898 to serve as a Rough Rider in the Spanish-American War. He passed away in 1909 and was buried at Mount Moriah Cemetery. The hotel continues to be a gateway into Deadwood's past. It's said to be haunted by Bullock's ghost, but the stories are pretty boring. Employees have reported poltergeist activity and disembodied footsteps in restricted areas. Thermosphere Gallery. Buckminster Fuller came to lecture at Black Hills State University in the early 1970s. Fuller was a famous architect who developed the geodesic dome, a round structure made out of interconnected shapes. He was a visionary who wanted to use the concept to make some fantastical projects. I covered some of his plans in the Unbuilt Architecture video. Fuller was put on a collision course with a young college student named Dick Termes. Termes was given an assignment to pick up Fuller and his wife from the airport and take them to the Black Hills. Termes and Fuller talked about geodesic domes and other architectural concepts for most of the ride. Termes had 3 acres of property outside of Spearfish and, inspired by Fuller, began construction of a geodesic dome to use as a studio. He continued to expand the dome into an entire complex over the decades. Termes made 3-dimensional paintings on spheres and hung them up, making pieces of art he called Termospheres. His work is said to resemble the fantastical paintings of M.C. Escher. The domes are now the site of the Thermosphere Gallery. It's open to the public. You can even talk to Termes. Gear up. Firefighters responded to a call outside of the town of Platte in September 2015. They found the remains of 6 bodies in the ash of a burned-out building. They were identified as the Westerhoos family. The father, Scott, had taken out his family before setting fire to the house and taking himself out. Scott Westerhoos was a manager of Gear Up, a public education group designed to enhance education for local communities. Westerhoos had used Gear Up to funnel money from a series of nonprofits directly into his own bank accounts. He committed suicide after he was informed that Mid-Central, the company that operated Gear Up, had lost a $4.3 million contract. Several other members of the program's administration were also accused of embezzlement in the wake of Scott's death. Red Pipestone. This rock is also called Catlinite. It was traditionally used by some tribes to make ceremonial smoking pipes, which led to its name. There's even an origin story for pipestone, which goes as follows. At an ancient time, the Great Spirit, in the form of a large bird, stood upon a rock wall and called all the tribes around him, and, breaking out a piece of the red stone, formed it into a pipe. He began to smoke, and the clouds billowed and covered the multitude. He told his children that the red stone was their flesh, that they were made from it and would return to it. They must smoke through it and use it for nothing but pipes. Native American tribes traversed the Great Plains to quarry this stone from present-day Minnesota. Tribes out of the Dakota region use them as well. World's largest pheasant. I've made it way further in this video without seeing a gigantic animal sculpture than I ever did in the North Dakota video. We're almost an hour in. The world's largest pheasant lies in Huron, South Dakota. Huron prided itself as a premier pheasant hunting location, which inspired the town project, a giant pheasant statue. The statue was made by the sculptor R.F. Jacobs. It was completed in October 1959. The pheasant is 40 feet long, 28 feet tall, and weighs 22 tons. Wall drug signs. Wall drug was founded in 1932 in the town of Wall near the South Dakota Badlands. The owners of the store, the Hudstead family, implemented a plan that resulted in Wall drug becoming an internationally recognized business. Dorothy Hudstead suggested that the couple fund a series of signs to promote Wall drug. The rest of the family agreed, and advertising for Wall drug was placed on the highways all over the state of South Dakota. Barry Knutson, a student taking art classes at South Dakota State University, worked to make the signs for the Hudsteads. Wall drug flourished thanks to the advertising campaign, and the Hudsteads placed more signs in locations further and further away from Wall, South Dakota. America entered the Second World War, and a friend of the family named Lionel Jensen began to make his own wall drug signs as he liberated Europe with the Allied forces. This was picked up by other service members, and wall drug signs were seen in combat zones in the Korean and Vietnam Wars. Valtaroti Shiloh's Tabernacle Center. This location is just up the street from the Corn Palace in Mitchell. The building formerly housed the Enchanted Doll Museum, which is worth an entry by itself. Otnil Iancu, a Romanian Seventh-day Adventist, purchased the castle-like building in 2008. His original concept would have seen the castle become a restaurant that served only dishes mentioned in the first 5 books of the Old Testament. He scrapped the restaurant plan as the costs surpassed his budget. Iancu decided to make replicas of biblical events, from the parting of the Red Sea to God giving Moses the 10 Commandments. It was billed as a spiritual, educational, and recreational park all in one. Valtaroti was closed in 2021. Walking Sam. This urban legend is connected to the Pine Ridge Reservation south of the Badlands. The area has a dark history, as hundreds of Lakota tribespeople were taken out in the Wounded Knee Massacre of 1890. It saw a tense standoff between U.S. soldiers and tribespeople, and in bloodshed after a single weapon misfire. The Pine Ridge Reservation was swept by a series of suicide attempts in the winter of 2014. Over 103 suicide attempts were recorded in the area, with the attempts resulting in the deaths of 9 people. All of the individuals were under the age of 26. Some in the community pointed to old legends that spoke of shadowy beings who subjected teens to vicious spiritual attacks. This fed into the legend of Walking Sam. Walking Sam was said to be a tall figure with protruding eyes and a mouthless head. He would approach lone victims and convince them to take themselves out. The stories surrounding Walking Sam have been less common in the past few years, but the mental health issues in the reservation continue. Porter Sculpture Park. Wayne Porter's family moved to St. Lawrence when he was 4 years old. His father took charge at the St. Lawrence blacksmith shop, and Wayne grew up learning how to work and shape metal. He made his first sculpture, a small bull's head, when he was 10 years old, and soon started to weld. Wayne went to college in Brookings and then returned to St. Lawrence to raise sheep. He soon sold his flock and began to focus on making art. Wayne spent 3 years making a 60-foot-tall metal bull's head. He decided to place it near the family blacksmith shop on Main Street. His work grew in popularity, and Wayne was able to buy a plot of land south of the town of Montrose. Wayne Porter has made over 60 sculptures in the years since. The park is open part of the year. The display will be available to the public from May 15th to October 15th in 2025. In God We Trust. A state law implemented in 2019 requires all South Dakotan public schools to display the national motto, In God We Trust, in an area where students are most likely to see it. Entryways and cafeterias are given as prime examples. It must be 12 by 12 inches in size and easily legible. Art Alley. Art Alley runs from 6th to 7th Streets in Rapid City. Its surfaces have been a canvas for artists since the early 2000s. The City Arts Council made a permit system in 2016, which resulted in a more concrete public art project. The administration of the alley was eased up post-pandemic, resulting in the displays shifting constantly from week to week. COVID patients. This entry surrounds groups of sick South Dakotans who were sent out of state in the winter of 2020. Space in state hospitals had grown scarce, and multiple patients were flown to neighboring regions in November and December of 2020. Chapel in the Hills. Dr. Gregerson was a radio preacher who saw success with his program, Lutheran Vespers. He returned to his home state and moved to the Black Hills. Gregerson decided to build a place of worship in the style of the traditional Norwegian stave church. His audience was primarily Norwegian Lutherans, and he decided to invoke his listeners' cultural heritage. The stave church was directly modeled on the Borgund stave church in Lærdal, Norway. A wood carver named Erik Fridstrom and a local named Helga Christensen worked together on the church. The group also built a grass-roofed visitor center, a caretaker's cabin, and a house for the Parsons family. The chapel was dedicated on July 6, 1969, and served as the home for Lutheran Vespers up until 1975. The program was moved to Minneapolis that year. The chapel still holds services and remains open to the public. Devil's Gulch legend. Devil's Gulch is located near Garrettson, close to the Minnesota border. Devil's Gulch is a Native American holy site that was once called Spirit Canyon. It's said that the outlaw Jesse James jumped the Devil's Gulch Gap while evading a posse from the town of Northfield. The gap where he's said to have jumped is 18 feet wide. Spirit Mound. This site in Clay County was called the Mountain of Evil Spirits or the Hill of Little People by the Native Americans. The Little People were armed with bows and arrows and attacked anyone who approached the mound. Buffalo Chip Venue. This party event was started in 1982 when a group of bikers had a 3-day party in a remote pasture. The annual event continued to grow in scale. It's now billed as the largest music festival in motorcycling. It features concerts, stunt acts, races, and bike shows, among other activities. It was once a town, thanks to a 2018 ruling from the state Supreme Court. However, Another judge said that a new town must have 100 residents and 30 voters to qualify to be a town. The town had 30 voters, but also less than 100 residents, and lost its status in 2019. Mount Roosevelt Friendship Tower. This monument was made by Seth Bullock, a lawman I covered earlier in the video. He made the tower to commemorate his friendship with Teddy Roosevelt. It was completed in 1919, the same year in which both Bullock and Roosevelt passed away. Mount Rushmore Sculptors' Connections. Gutzon Borglum, the sculptor for the Mount Rushmore project, was not a pleasant guy. Borglum was originally from Idaho, but his ideology aligned with white supremacist groups. He expressed disapproval for Native Americans and other ethnic groups, and had ties to members of the Special K. UN Headquarters. Paul Bellamy, a Spanish-American war veteran, looked out through his curtains on a dark September morning. Two men in military uniform stood outside the entryway. The hard knocks of one of the men punctuated the soft patter of rain. Bellamy cracked the door open. He opened his mouth. "Hello?" "Good morning, Mr. Bellamy. We're here to inform." Bellamy's son, a B-17 pilot, perished in a mid-air collision over England in the Second World War. He grieved. Meanwhile, the United Nations started an initiative to select a place for their new headquarters after the war. Bellamy heard about this and began a campaign to make the Black Hills the new home of the UN. He wanted to see his home region become a new major political center. He had a lot of competition. Over 248 different localities wanted to host the headquarters. Major cities like LA and Chicago, along with remote areas like the Kiamishi Mountains in Oklahoma, put in their own applications. Bellamy's ad touted the remote location, high-quality stone, and solid foundations of the Black Hills. Bellamy advertised cool lakes, gushing trout streams, and the eerie Badlands, teeming with fossil treasures. The Black Hills advocates released a plan for a headquarters designed by the architect Luveen Berg. Berg's Capitol building design would have 1 million square feet of office space, an auditorium capable of seating 20,000 people, and a massive tower topped by a globe. An open court would stretch in front of the Capitol for 3/4 of a mile. Administration, public affairs, and security offices would line the avenue, along with office buildings for major powers like the US and the Soviet Union. Concentric roads would be lined by the embassies of various nations, each personalized to reflect the culture of each country. Hotels and village retreats would dot the hillsides above the complex. Bellamy flew into London at the end of 1945 and made his case. He was rejected after a few weeks of deliberation from the UN. They went on to pick a spot along the East River in New York. Special K. The Special K first arrived in the state in 1921. Their presence grew, and in 1926, 500 Klan members marched in a parade down Phillips Avenue in Sioux Falls. Their parade was attended by over 10,000 people. Cross-burning occurred in communities stretching across the Black Hills region, from Sturgis to Deadwood. Some organizations fought back, with the Deadwood Fire Department publishing a notice at their station. The following is a rough paraphrase of the message. "If you are a Deadwood fireman and a member of the Klan, we won't just kick you out, we will scratch your name out of the station's records." The organization's power has greatly diminished in the intervening years. Edgemont Compound. This refers to the former Black Hills Ordnance Depot, 8 miles south of Edgemont. The depot was operational between 1942 and 1967. It held and tested chemical weapons and conventional munitions. The depot also served as a prisoner of war camp for Italian troops in World War II. It housed 750 workers on average in the post-war era. The community called their little commune Igloo after the 802 igloo-like munition storage bunkers in the compound. The Black Hills Depot was abandoned in 1967. Edgemont remained in disrepair until 2016, when the Vivos Group purchased the site. The Vivos Group is a bunker survival company. They transformed the area into a series of private survival bunkers. It will be the largest survival community in the world upon completion, housing more than 5,000 individuals. Huron STD outbreak. The following is an excerpt from a 2002 Los Angeles Times article. Huron, South Dakota. Here they are, college students from big cities in Texas and Florida, Michigan and Arizona, living in a frozen farm town where the most lively clubs around are the American Legion and the veterans of foreign wars. They are young, and they feel invincible. And they are bored. So many students at Sitanka Huron University party just about every night. Nico Britaramos was a freshman at Sitanka in the town of Huron. He was charged with intentionally exposing 11 different women to the HIV virus over the course of a few months. 2 of the women tested positive and recorded that they had had over 50 different partners between them. Over 135 students were screened for the disease, and hundreds at the school and community were likely put at risk as well. Britaramos was sentenced to 18 months in the South Dakota State Jail. EB5. A former state government official took themselves out in the fall of 2013. This sparked an open investigation. It was discovered that the official had stolen over $555,000 in state funds. He had been working on the EB5 initiative, a program designed to attract foreign investors to establish businesses in the U.S. The official had been making trips to China and South Korea to talk to some investors who wanted to build a new beef plant in South Dakota. The governor at the time approved a loan to the plant, which the official immediately pocketed. Spook Road. This road runs near Beaver Creek Nature Area, south of the town of Brandon. It has a few stories around it. Spook Road, supposedly, runs over 4 bridges. It's said that you'll cross a 5th bridge if you're heading west along the road. You'll need to go down all of Spook Road towards the east, then double back and go west. Demonic deer creatures and robed cultists are said to stalk the tree line past the 5th bridge. Burning Bluffs. This section of the Missouri Riverbank appears to be on fire. It's an iron sulfide deposit that smokes when it mixes with oxygen and water. The clay nearby retains water, causing the smoke to increase even more. The effect can be seen on the riverside between Chamberlain and Fort Randall. 1964 Vale Incident. 2 airmen were conducting maintenance on a Minuteman I missile at Ellsworth Air Force Base on December 5, 1964. One airman's screwdriver caused a short circuit in a thruster, resulting in an explosion that sent the missile warhead 75 feet down to the bottom of the silo. The 750-pound cone hit the wall of the silo, bounced, grazed the missile's suspension cables, and landed on its side. The airmen quickly got out of the area. A broken arrow event was declared, and personnel were evacuated while medics and radiation monitoring teams were dispatched to the area. The warhead was found intact, and the government's fear subsided. The cone was carefully extracted from the silo over the course of 4 days. Pringle Compound. The following is taken from a 2022 online listing of this place. 77 bedrooms, 74 baths, split between 6 log structures, has perimeter fence and watchtower. Scenic area in southern Black Hills. It was sold for around $3.4 million. A year later, sections of the compound were listed on Airbnb. The descriptions were pretty average, advertising a king bed, shared bathroom, and other amenities. However, neither of these sales mentioned the dark history of the compound. Locals knew well enough what took place there. I'll briefly try to cover the history of the splinter group that called the compound home. The Mormon territory of Utah gained statehood in 1890. They did this at the cost of giving up their practices of polygamy. One group refused to give up the practice and formed the Fundamentalist Church of Latter-day Saints, FLDS for short. They relocated to the Hilldale, Colorado City area near the Utah-Arizona border. I covered a few of their activities in the Utah video I made. The group survived the 20th century despite government interference and leadership disputes. They had roughly 10,000 members by the turn of the century. They were led by one man, Rulon Jeffs, who was then succeeded by his son, Warren Jeffs. The younger Jeffs became more strict, outlawing activities like watching TV and swimming, and directly assigning wives and husbands. He would reassign spouses and excommunicated many younger men that he viewed as competition. Jeffs committed multiple acts that resulted in his placement on the FBI's top 10 most wanted list. He went on the run and was captured in 2006. He managed to organize a mass movement of his followers while running from the authorities, sending them to large compounds in Texas and Colorado. He sent his brother Seth with another group to establish a compound in Pringle, South Dakota. The FLDS fell apart after Warren Jeffs was found dead in his jail cell, and the compound was sold. Ray Robinson. Robinson was a civil rights activist who supported Martin Luther King Jr.'s ongoing push for equal rights for African Americans. He traveled from the South all the way to the Pine Ridge Reservation in South Dakota to support Native American protesters. The standoff went on for 71 days and resulted in 2 tribal member deaths and the wounding of a federal agent. The Minnesotan-based American Indian movement, AIM for short, were very suspicious of Robinson, believing him to be a federal informant. The group was known to be violent. Robinson was seen trying to talk to AIM leaders about strategies for their campaign. The conversation grew heated as AIM was still very suspicious of Robinson. A witness said that Robinson was taken away by a security team to a small house. Robinson grabbed a knife from a table as the confrontation grew more violent, and a group surrounded him. A single shot was fired. Robinson's body was never found. President's Park. This park had 43 busts of all of the presidents up to the second Bush. They were made by the artist David Dykes, who is well known for the Sam Houston Monument, which can be seen next to the interstate near Huntsville, Texas. He was commissioned to make this attraction in Deadwood. Dykes made 43 20-foot tall busts and placed them along a winding path in the woods. The park opened in 2003, but went out of business by 2010. Many of the busts have been left to rot in the abandoned park. Other heads were scattered over the country. Kennedy, Reagan, and the second Bush were last seen in a RV park in Hermosa, South Dakota. Sika Hollow. This area of the Prairie Coteau Hills is draped in dark forest. It's in the northeast part of the state. It was used by the Sioux tribes as a hunting ground in the past. One section of the hills is said to be a site of great power. Sika Hollow roughly translates to Bad Hollow in the native language. Phenomena exclusive to the hollow includes the sounds of drums in the night and floating orbs that hover over the springs. There's also a legend that explains the red-tinted water that flows out of Sika Hollow's underground springs. A lone wanderer called Hand entered the hollow thousands of years ago. The hollow was a popular spot in the wintertime as the hills protected the natives from the brutal prairie winds and heavy snowfall. The trees harbored plenty of creatures for the locals to hunt as well. Hand took out the game without even thanking the gods who ruled the area, and quickly drew the ire of the rulers of the hollow. They banished him once the weather became warm again. Hand convinced the young men of the tribe to follow his ways, and they soon turned their back on the gods. The elders didn't stand a chance when their warriors rose up, and prayed to their warrior god, Thunderer. Thunderer answered, and after a fierce battle, Hand and his group were destroyed. Their blood mingled with the water of the underground streams. Car next to Interstate 29. This rusted-out sedan can still be seen on satellite imagery today on a hill between Watertown and Brookings. It's been there for over 15 years. There's a few stories that try to explain how it got there. Some say that a drunken local trying to get to their home across this ravine snapped their axle and simply left the car there. Others say that a person died in the vehicle and the car was left to dry in the sun after the accident. Hooky Jack. John Leary, born in 1849, made his way to the Black Hills in the 1880s. He started doing work at the old Grand Junction mine in Custer City. He and another man were prepping blasting powder that frozen solid. They warmed it with their hands to break it up so that they could blast an entry hole in a piece of rock. The powder suddenly exploded, blinding Leary and destroying his hands. Hundreds of others were injured in the fallout of the explosion. Leary barely survived. Henry Mall, a friend of his, made hooks for Leary. They attached to Leary's shoulders and back, allowing the hooks to open and close as he moved. He picked up work as a night watchman in Rapid City's neighborhoods. He held this job until he passed away in November 1926. Rapid Creek drownings. This 86-mile-long creek runs through the Rapid City area. 4 Native American men were found face down in Rapid Creek between 1998 and 2000. The deaths were found to be cases of foul play, but the police left the case unsolved. The details of the case are extremely vague, and if there was a murderer, he remains on the loose. Sturgis Rally trafficking. We've already established that the Sturgis Motorcycle Rally draws in a lot of people. As with many large events that draw in people from around the country, this attracts the trafficking of drugs, illicit goods, and even people. I-90 and I-29 run through South Dakota. They're part of the Midwest Pipeline, a system used to deliver victims across the country. The Sturgis event channels vehicle traffic through the region, and many operations use the relatively quiet state as a cover for what they do. Undercover law enforcement has cataloged dozens of cases in just the past few years centered on the motorcycle rally. Trafficking continues to be an ongoing issue. This is the bonus tier. I include these at the end of my Iceberg videos. Contains a handful of entries that weren't included in the Iceberg that I still thought were worth covering. There's a lot of other cool entries involving the state, and this is just a little sample of what's still left out there. Let's begin. Earth Groans. Earth Groans is a metalcore outfit based out of South Dakota. They're a Christian band whose name comes from Romans 8:23, which reads, "Even we ourselves groan within ourselves, waiting for the adoption, to wit, the redemption of our body." Their sound isn't crazy different from most modern metalcore, but they love to use off-time notes in flat vocals. The band's been in the back of my mind for a while, mostly due to the video for their song Overgrown. Its visuals tell the story of a man trapped in a coffin underground, desperately trying to give his position away to a search party in the forest above him. One of the members of the search party is his young son. The music's solid, and the final image of that video still haunts me. Dakota Triangle. This section of land runs from Sisseton to the Millbank exit to Waubay on I-29. It's often hit by thick fog and strong winds that center on the town of Summit. The areas outside of the triangle usually experience completely different weather conditions. Summit sits on a high part of the Prairie des Coteaux Plateau in the east part of the state, which results in the town being blasted by bad weather. The Dakota Triangle also harbors some other anomalies. The Lake Traverse Reservation lies within the triangle and has been plagued by large amounts of missing persons cases in past decades. Pallet Man. This borderline urban legend has been seen on the streets of Sioux Falls. Pallet Man drives an old-gen Jeep WK Grand Cherokee SUV. His vehicle is usually topped by a precarious pallet pile, and the trunk is filled with another dangerously large stack of wooden pallets. The first Pallet Man was reported around 4 years ago on the Sioux Falls subreddit. Another Pallet Man, this time in an older Cherokee Sport, appeared a year after that. A Chevy Silverado made waves on the Sioux Falls pallet scene a few months back with cargo that put both of the others to shame. The Chevy has been spotted in Minnesota as well. Alright, that is it for the South Dakota Iceberg. It was a lot of fun to make. Thank you for watching or listening this far. If you enjoyed what you liked or heard, check out the Patreon or take a look at some of the other videos I've made. If you'd like to check out the original chart, you can find a link to it in the description. I'll see you around. Take care and have a great night. Until next time.